Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Women's Fitness Academy podcast. I am one of your hosts, Ellen, and I am a binge and body image coach as well as an educator for Women's Fitness Academy. And today I am here with someone who is actually going to join us at one of our retreats here in beautiful Bali. Her name is Alexa Towersey. She is a mental health advocate and a high performance coach. I first met her at, I think it was a 98 gym in Bondi. And was just like, this girl is like amazing. She's such a good coach, and she's just so cool. And now I heard she has an amazing story to tell as well. But I'm going to stop talking now so she can introduce herself. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was in 98 Bondi that we met.
Yeah. I remember. I was like, wait, who is that really, really fit girl? Because like, you were shredded.
I'm all show no go, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, that'd be silly. Yeah, no. And then I just I started talking to you, and I was like, oh my god, she's actually so nice. And then I saw that you have this big influencer platform, and I was like, oh my god, she's kind of like famous.
You know, there's such a funny story. When I first came to Sydney, and like I knew nothing, I didn't even have Instagram when I first came to Sydney. Really? And I remember doing this interview, and they introduced me as like a celebrity trainer.
Oh.
And I was like, and I started blushing, and I was like, oh my God, I'm a celebrity. I was like, oh, I'm not really, a celebrity or anything. And they're like, no, that means that you train celebrities. And I was like, oh, not awkward at all. Anyway. Shit.
That's hilarious. Oh yeah. My God, that's so funny. Well, you actually told me a funny story about how people, because your name on Instagram is Action Alexa, isn't it? And how
it should be No Action Alexa, but yes.
And how you went into a pub and someone, what did they say to you?
Oh, the guys just sit down next to me, and like, I mean, my name is pretty hard to pronounce at the best of times, but literally no one knows my actual name. So they say, hey, Action, you want an arm wrestle? It's like, yep, I'm that girl. That's awesome. Cool. No phone numbers, just arm wrestles.
Yeah. I feel like you get that sometimes though, being like a thick girl. That, like when I was at my leanest, when I was doing like a lot of CrossFit, like everyone would always be like, oh, can you lift me? Like you could probably squat more than me. And he's like, yeah, hello with you too. Like, nice to meet you.
Oh my God, story of my life. Story of my life. How much do you bench? How much do you squat? Oh my God.
Yeah.
Come up with something more original.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And then it's like they try and nag you a little bit. Like, oh, you can only squat that much. Oh, I can do this. I'm like, fucking hell, I'm still not interested in you, so I don't care. Anyway. Tell us about your story. Like, you're obviously not from Australia. So when did you move here? When did you get into fitness? Like, yeah, let's go.
Wow, this is a big question. How long you got? Okay.
An hour, so
perfect.
As much as you want.
So look, I definitely wasn't born in Australia. I was born in Scotland. My parents were both military, like British military. So my dad was a major in the British Army. My mum was a medic, and that's how they met. So she specialized in gunshot wounds. They met in the army. I was conceived on the way back from a posting in Cyprus. I was born in Scotland. Then I went to military school in England, Ireland, and Germany until I was 10. And then my dad decided that he was going to retire from the British Army, and our only living relatives were actually in New Zealand. So we moved to New Zealand when I was 10. And then I didn't really I'd always played sports up until that point. Like my dad used to joke around with me and say that because he was a massive cricketer and football player. So he used to wake me up at 3 a.m. to watch Spurs play. He used to take me to massive cricket matches. And he said all I used to do when he took me to Lords was just run around and around and around the cricket pitch. So I've always been, I guess, fit. I'd always been like a really good runner. Always been sort of into, team sports, I guess. He sort of got me into them right from the beginning. He was always the coach of my soccer team. And then, but I didn't really go to the gym until I turned 15. And I think my true journey with fitness began when I was 15 because two major things happened to me. First thing was that I was bullied at school for being too skinny. So my nickname at school back then wasn't Action Alexa, sadly. It was Alexa Anorexia.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah, I wasn't part of the cool kids group. I was really, really skinny. I had buck teeth. I had this long blonde hair that I could sit on, and I was just really frail. And I got hassled a lot, especially when I moved to New Zealand, and my accent was different. And that was my first experience with how mean kids could be.
Mm.
And being bullied, I guess every time something bad happens to you, you have a choice as to what you do with that thing. And for me, it got me into the gym. Like, I was like, okay, cool, I'm going to go to the gym now. It's time for the mission for muscles. So that's sort of where I started. And at the same time, it was sort of really good timing, because while that was happening at school, my mum had been diagnosed with manic depression at home. So it was kind of like, when that happened, my life changed overnight, and my home life became less of a sanctuary, and my parents became less of my parents, because I was sort of forced to pick up an adult role very, very, very early on because of what was happening. But the gym, where it started out as this journey for aesthetics and journey to put on size and gain strength, it became this sanctuary. Like, the gym became my safe place. The weights room was like the first place that I felt that I was connected. It was the first place that I felt like I had control over my life. It was the first place I felt like empowered. And I think that was the first time that I really, really understood the connection between what it was like to develop physical strength, and then the mental fortitude, or the toughness and the resilience that came alongside that. And I think that's the thing, that's the gift that I found really early on, that I was really fortunate that I had this positive experience with fitness. And that's the thing that I want to pay forward. It's why I love what I do, because I want more people to experience that gift and that connection and that sense of empowerment. Because especially when it comes to women, what I find is that when women become empowered in their training, you can watch the change in their attitude, and you can watch how this change in attitude translates into everything else that they do in life.
100%.
So I want to give that back. So that's kind of where it all began for me, in terms of fitness.
Yeah, that's amazing. But so when you were getting like bullied in school, did you ever feel like you could talk about it at home, or was this something that you kind of kept close to you and dealt with yourself?
I never spoke about it. Like, back in those days, and like, this is where I'm showing my age, there was like no awareness or education or resources or support networks around mental health or suicide prevention or mental illness. There was nothing. Like, depression wasn't even a recognized textbook disease. And I don't think anyone really understood what was happening. I certainly didn't. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if there was anyone to talk to. And so I just said nothing at all. And, if you ask me what my dad thought about the situation, I've got absolutely no idea, because not once did we ever have a conversation about it. And I think the ultimate consequence of that was that 2 years later, and it was 2 weeks before my university entrance exams, and my mum tried to take her life. And I walked in, like, I intervened in the situation, and she ended up physically surviving that day, but something died in our relationship, if that makes any sense. And because I just didn't know how to help her, and I didn't know how to love her. And to this day, it is the only regret that I ever have, the inability to handle the situation, and the fact that it would then take me, like, after it happened, I sort of never really forgave her. I carried a lot of resentment and a lot of hate. And that sounds really awful, but I think when you're that young, you just don't know any better. And I had nobody to teach me, like, I often get asked, who were your role models when you were younger? And honestly, I didn't have any. Like, I had people I didn't want to be like, and I had situations that I didn't want to end up in. So it kind of like, it was the anti-role model situation. I had to make these decisions. And like, now all the mental health work that I do, again, you find yourself in these positions where you can make a decision about how the rest of your life turns out. And now, I choose to be a mental health advocate, because I want to give people the advice and the things that I wish I knew back then that would have helped me. Because it would have been like, when I was 27, I moved overseas to Hong Kong, and I really didn't have a great relationship with my mum for those 10 years. And when I moved to Hong Kong, and I was sort of speaking to other people about their families, and I was sort of missing having a connection because I was over there by myself. And I came to a decision one day that it was like, life's too short for this. I need to tell my mum that I love her. I need to rebuild that bridge, and I need to try and give her the love and the help that she deserves. And by the time I had made the decision to do that, that was on a Friday, I was like, I'm going to call her on the Monday and I'm going to tell her that I love her so she doesn't feel alone. She died that weekend in an accident. I never, ever got to do it. So it was one of those things where, you know, you learn these incredibly painful lessons, but it does put me in a beautiful position now from which to speak about my experience, where it's like, look, I get where you're at, but just think about that argument, think about those words that you're saying, think about the positions, because really no one ever regrets being the bigger person. No one ever regrets being kind. And those are the lessons, like however painful they are to learn early on, those are the lessons that I've taken with me throughout my journey. And those are the lessons I try and teach now. So, you know, good and bad to everything.
Oh, that honestly makes me so emotional. I can relate to it so much, because like for myself, like me and my dad had a really bad relationship growing up. I'm not going to go into it too much, but anyway, when him and my mom split up, I basically just said, I'm not going to talk to you ever again. Like, I hate you. Don't talk to me. And he basically hunted me down in Norway, found out where I live, waited at my house to me, forced me to talk to him. And then we could kind of start rebuilding our relationship from there.
Wow.
Which then he also passed away in an accident. And I'm so grateful that I was able to do that. So I feel so much for you that you didn't get that chance. But it's amazing that what you're doing now, that you're helping people like learn from your experience, instead of kind of feeling that like, oh, life is so unfair. Like, why didn't I get this chance? Or like feeling that guilt within yourself as well, that, oh, I should have done it. I should have done this. I should have acted sooner. I should have done that. I think that's probably a very common place for people to go.
It is. And it's like, you know, those are the things that you don't sort of take for granted now. But I wouldn't, like, looking back now, I probably wouldn't change any of the things that I've been through, because even though they were incredibly tough at the time, you know, when I look at how resilient I am now, it's kind of like, well, all of that is experiential. Like for me, resilience comes from experience. It comes from going through really tough stuff, coming out the other side, so that whenever something hard is thrown at you, kind of go, okay, well, I've been through this other thing and that was really difficult, but I survived. And I came out the other side with all this new knowledge and all this new experience. So regardless of what happens, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think not enough people have that faith. They don't understand that when something hard really happens, that this is just one day in your life or 1 week in your life. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a bad life. You have choices, you have things to learn, you have ways in which you can grow, you have people to lean on. You know, so that's kind of what I hope to do by doing the talks and stuff that I do, like in going into schools and talking to kids about mental health and making them understand that it's okay not to be okay. But they can talk about it, and, you know, it's not the end of the world, and there are things to learn, and there is light at the end of the tunnel. It's just going to be painful today.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's so important to remember as well, that what you said, that it might suck right now, life might be absolutely fucking awful, but it's not going to be like this forever. Eventually it will turn and it will get better, and like, you're not going to wake up tomorrow probably and be like, oh, life is amazing, but you know, slowly but steady you're going to overcome whatever it is that broke you, and you're going to, if you can overcome it, you're going to be so much stronger when you come out on the other side.
Oh, 100%. And you also just learn to sort of flow with the go, I guess, you know, like it's like having, you know, I noticed that with my cycle, all the changes that you go through, there are days that I'm really overly emotional, but I'm like, okay, I'm going to have 3 days of absolute shit. My life is not shit. I just don't feel great right now. But in 3 days, I'll be absolutely fine. Just suck it up and one step in front of the other. And those are the, you know, you take the small wins like that.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, God, we've all had our hearts broken from someone, and like, obviously 100%. We're all still fine. So
yeah, you know? We haven't died from any of our hardships yet.
yeah, exactly. You've survived 100% of your hard days, and you can survive the one that's going to come next as well. And but it's just so amazing that, like, I wish there was someone like you when I was in school who could come and talk about mental health and like say that it's okay to speak up, it's okay to talk about your feelings, it's okay to talk about, you know, being bullied or whatever is going on for you. And like obviously neither of us grew up in Australia, so don't know what the school system is like here and like the culture about talking about these things. But I know every single person that I've interviewed from Europe, and obviously I'm from Sweden, has said the same thing. And that's like, we didn't talk about our feelings at home. This was not something we never spoke about at school. Like no one ever really said or spoke up if they were feeling bad. So it's amazing that it is getting a bit more spoken about now and a bit more like normalized.
Oh, 100%. And like my whole thing when it comes to, especially when it comes to coming into schools, it's like, you don't have to have a mental illness to start having a conversation about your mental health. You know, like the earlier you speak up, just like with a broken bone or an injury or physical pain, the quicker you get on top of it, the faster you're going to heal.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the same when it comes to mental health. So I hope more people feel like they can have more conversations now.
Yeah, it's so true actually. Yeah, if you break your wrist or something, you're like, I'm going to doctor straight away.
100%.
It's not crazy. People just don't do that with their mental health. And fuck, I've also been bad for it. So not not saying that it's perfect or anything like that, but we're all learning and we're getting better. And yeah, I think it's like what you're doing is amazing. And I just love how you really used it to grow as a person and become stronger, more resilient, sharing your experiences as well. And you also mentioned that you feel like the gym really helped you in that, which is like crazy common. It is all the time. And I guess for us, it's kind of like, yeah, of course it's going to help. Like you feel so good after a workout, right? But for people who don't train, they'll be like, that's the fucking last thing I want to do. Like, I feel like I'm going to cry. I don't want to go to the gym.
Oh, I know. And that's it. Look, I think it's funny because when I first became a personal trainer, it was definitely a different mindset of what a good session was and what you should be making your clients do. You know, back in the days when I was in Hong Kong and I was training predominantly men, you know, a good workout was sort of classed as like they are literally almost vomiting and passed out on the floor and in so much pain, you know, and you sort of derived a sick sense of satisfaction out of that. And over the years, you know, you sort of get to understand that that is not quite what training is all about. And there is, you know, there's a different side to it. And I think, you know, the whole enjoyment or having a positive experience with your training, it's often underestimated. I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that like no pain, no gain, or go hard and go home.
Yeah.
You know, like you don't have to enjoy your workouts, but if having a positive experience with exercise and enjoying your fitness journey is the thing that makes you want to keep doing it for the rest of your life, why are we not reinforcing that more?
Yeah.
And it's funny, I didn't really truly appreciate that until I had my hip replacement. And then you realize what fitness actually means to you and your mindset.
Yeah, totally. I was just having this conversation with someone the other day and he was saying kind of like, oh, that's gym over there. They do all this stupid, weird shit. Like doesn't really have any purpose of doing it. And I'm like, yeah, but at least people are going in moving and they're coming 100%. Back consistently and they're doing that 30-minute or like an hour workout. Like, yeah, okay, they might not be the best program to build glutes or to, you know, I don't know, whatever it is that you want to do, but at least you're moving. Like that's amazing.
100%. And that's not necessarily like, not everyone has to have, that's the other conversation we don't have very often is like, not everyone has to have the goal of building muscle or getting stronger. For some people, a really great goal is just doing something, moving, feeling like something has been achieved, ticking a box, meeting up with their friends, feeling inspired and connected, like having fun. It doesn't always have to be driven by an aesthetic or a performance goal. A goal or an intention can literally just be to feel better about yourself. And if going to a gym and connecting with your mates and having a fun workout is how you do that, then it's better than sitting at home on the couch binging what I am at the moment with Too Hot to Handle.
Yeah, totally. And especially like these days when literally everyone has like a phone glued to their hand nonstop. Like maybe that hour in the gym, like, okay, maybe it's not the sweatiest workout that you could do, but at least it's an hour of your day when you're not checking your phone and when you can kind of put all that to the side and just be present and in the moment. And like you said, have fun with your friends, get a little bit sweaty, high five a couple of people, and then leave feeling like so much better.
100%. And honestly, like I think most of the people that I've come across throughout my fitness experience a lot of them have started going to the gym for aesthetic reasons.
Mm.
And then along the way, they've discovered other things, other important things that go alongside that, like the connection, like the community, like that sense of empowerment. You know, they like how they feel. They like feeling strong and powerful, you know, but they had to start somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
100%. Well, yeah, I see this all the time. Like, obviously, like, I'm doing CrossFit over here and I've been doing it for a while. And like most girls, going to a gym to lose weight. Like, that's basically what I see with every single client that I have. They go to the gym because they want to lose weight. And then you kind of shift that mindset, like you said, to like, okay, but how do you want to feel? Like, do you want to feel strong? And then, like, when someone gets the first pull up, or when someone can squat their body weight, or, you know, run a mile without having to stop, like, that feeling is so much better than having a six pack or having amazing glutes or being, I don't know, 10% body fat or whatever your goal is.
Oh, 100%. And like, even, you know, I did the Mongol Derby this year and I've signed up to a bunch of crazy challenges. But like, for me, everyone was like, where did you get the confidence to think you could do that? And I'm like, pretty much from training. Because if you've done some really hard, crazy shit in the gym and you've got through it, like, you know what your first PB on a deadlift was, or getting your first pull up, you know what they felt like. And it's that sense of kind of like badassery that you get from doing specific performance-based goals in the gym that give you confidence to do awesome stuff outside of the gym. And that's what it comes down to for me now, is like, training for me is not about hitting specific goals inside the gym. It's not about how many pull-ups I can do. It's not about how much I can pull in a deadlift. I've been there and done that shit and got the t-shirts. For me now, it's about, how does this complement the rest of my life? How does this make me a better human outside of the gym? You know, and that for me is the most important part of training now.
Yes, I love that so much. And I love seeing that shift in people as well, going from just getting as sweaty as possible and doing the hardest thing and training for 4 hours and then being absolutely wrecked and injured and, you know, being able to walk. And now it's like, you know what, I just want to train to freaking feel good and look good naked, be able to eat lots of food. Like, hell yeah. So much better. So you said you moved to Hong Kong. How long were you there for?
I was there for 7.5 years, and my God, that place is freaking wild. Anything you want to do, anytime you want to do it, you can do it. And unfortunately for me, I was always a binge drinker. So I said that, you know, when I was 15, I found the gym. That was my first sense of connection. Well, my second sense of connection was when I found my dad's whiskey bottle. And following my mum's suicide attempt, my dad became a fully fledged alcoholic. Like, he was a functioning alcoholic until he was just a plain old messy alcoholic, until he ended up dying of liver cirrhosis as a direct consequence of being an alcoholic. And because I was never part of the cool crowd, in the weekdays I would go to the gym, and that was my sense of connection. That's how I felt great about myself. But in the weekends, I wanted to fit in, so I was using alcohol as a tool. So from the time I was 15, I had this dual existence. I had the duality of life, where I'd go to the gym and then I'd get shit-faced in the weekends. And that was kind of how I lived my life. And I would do that until I was 29. I quit finally. But when I moved to Hong Kong when I was 27, I ended up getting a job in PR and marketing for 3 bars. And I wanted to change. So I went to Hong Kong, and I probably spent 2 years pretty much getting drunk. I was drunk 5 nights a week. You know, friends would notice that, you know, it was starting to affect my work. It was affecting my relationships. You know, I started getting concerned for myself when I started looking forward to that 3 p.m. day where I had my first meeting and I could have my first glass of wine. And, you know, it would still take me another couple of years after these really confronting situations, after these really confronting conversations, uncomfortable conversations that my friends and my then partner was having with me. But when my dad died of alcoholism, that was kind of like the major pivot point. And I think that was probably, like, if I had to name one point that probably changed the direction of my life, that was it. Because when he died, I went to his funeral, I drank his last bottle of whiskey, I got absolutely shit-faced, I danced on the bar, fell off the bar, threw up all over myself, fell in a ditch, missed my flight back to Hong Kong the next day. And I turned to my partner the next morning, like, with barely any recollection of the funeral or of, you know, the after party of the funeral. And I was like, I'm never fucking doing that again. And he was sort of like chuckling to himself, you know, because everybody has had those mornings, those self-loathing Sundays where they're like, I am never drinking again. And he was like, yeah, until next weekend. And I was like, no, I don't think you understand. Like, I'm done. I'm absolutely done. And I went back to Hong Kong and I never touched another drop of alcohol. So for me, that was the pivot point. That was the epiphany. That was like the rock bottom of like, something has to change because I need to break the cycle here.
Yeah. Wow.
And that was where, you know, fitness again saved my life. Like, it was a point where I came back and I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? Because getting sober is really freaking hard. Yeah. And it's not like these Hollywood movies where, you know, you have the heroine who has this really bad experience and then all of a sudden you see it's just this straight line to success. And all of a sudden they're sober and thriving and they've got their dream job and they've got their dream partner and it's all happy days. You know, it wasn't like that at all. It was long and messy, and I was angry and resentful and frustrated for a lot of the early days. And I guess I was just lucky in that my partner at the time, he owned a mixed martial arts gym. So he was an ex-footy player, ex-martial artist. Well, he was a martial artist at the time. And while I was going through my journey of, you know, trying to figure out how I was going to maneuver my sobriety, he'd been like, well, look, come down to the gym. Why don't we do some interning? I'll pay for your qualifications, get back into fitness. I'll teach you everything I know. You can get into coaching. And I would turn up at the gym from like 5 to 8 in the morning. Then I'd go to my full-time job between 9 and 5 or 9 and 6. And then I'd go back to the gym at 6 to 9 at night. And I just train people for free. I'd intern, I'd get experience. I just learned whatever I could. And then I started picking up clients through that because I just found that I really loved what I did. And I loved the change, and I was really detail oriented, and I was really results focused. And I wanted people to love fitness as much as I did. And so I started doing that until I got enough clients that I could quit my full-time job. And that was how I made the transition. And during this process, one of the girls that went to the gym who I met, she had been through 4 years of drug and alcohol rehabilitation. And so she'd been sober for 4 years when I met her. And I remember going to her after the whole thing had just happened. And I was like, how do you do this? How do you navigate this? I'm so angry. I have no outlet anymore. Like, going to the gym is just not enough for me. I don't know what to do with myself on the weekends. Like, what am I meant to do here? And she was like, you have to find a purpose. Like, you have to find something bigger than yourself to focus on that takes your mind off that thing. And I was like, okay. So I ended up joining a triathlon club. And I was a terrible, terrible, terrible swimmer. Like, I'm terrified of sharks. I remember doing my first open water swim in Hong Kong, and someone had always told me that the shark nets in Hong Kong were like rubbish nets. So the nets were there so to prevent the rubbish from coming into the shore. And me, of course, just believed them. And I remember going out there one day and they're like, okay, so now we're just going to go over the shark nets. I'm like, we're going over the what?
Fuck that. I would not have done that.
What are you talking about? But I did it, and like, it took me, I think I ended up switching to half Ironman because I was a terrible swimmer. So I utilized the bike and the run to catch everybody. So I transitioned to half Ironman. I hired a coach, and in the 2.5 years that it took me to qualify for the world champs, I guess I initially replaced one addiction for another, but by the end of it, I didn't need either. So I'd stopped drinking. And then I decided that I had done everything that I wanted to do within half Ironman, and I was ready to move on. And, you know, the great thing about that was that it gave me a sense of purpose. It gave me something to focus on and a goal. It turns out I was quite good at it. It gave me something to do on the weekend, so I wasn't sitting at home with absolute FOMO while everybody else was out partying. But more importantly, it gave me another sense of connection, and it gave me this entirely new community of people who had similar journeys to me. So they absolutely understood what it was that I was trying to do, and they wanted to see me succeed. And I think that was the biggest part of it. And I think community is so underrated when it comes to stuff like sobriety and addiction, because it can be really confronting when you make decisions about your own life and the people around you think that you are indirectly challenging their own lifestyle choices, like you're a mirror for them. And so, you know, for lack of a better term, for me, initially, it was kind of like social suicide. And then, you know, because you're really unsure of your decision, you've got people being like, oh, you know, just have one drink. It's not going to be the end of the world. And that's why the why is so important when it comes to this stuff. But, you know, by the end of that, like, I had no problem going out. I could still be the life of the party. I didn't need a drink. And because I'd become accomplished as an athlete in the meantime, I really had a better understanding of who I was and what I was capable of. And I felt like I didn't need a crutch anymore. And that was that was the story of sobriety. So again, it was one of those things that you're faced with this really tough situation. But for me, fitness really stepped in and sort of saved my life again. And
yeah, I think that's so amazing. And it's really cool how you spoke about how you basically replaced one addiction with another, because this is something that I think a lot of us nutrition coaches see, that coming from a lot of restricted dieting, for example, they're obsessed with restricting their food, they're obsessed with tracking, they're obsessed with, you know, everything has to be perfect in that way, to then going into binge eating, which is what I mostly work with. That's what happened to me. I was obsessed with tracking food, and then I was obsessed with binge eating. I just replaced one obsession with another. But how did you find that middle ground after? Because you said you were obsessed with your training and then you just stopped. How did you find like moving on to like having the balance that you have now?
I think a big part of it was community, but I think I also, through the process of joining a new community and adding another skill set, like learning something new, getting good at something new, enjoying the feeling of success in a different avenue, that gave me a different sense of purpose. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, is like, well, what am I here for? Why am I here? What do I want to do with my life? And I think for me, fitness kind of showed me what it was that I wanted to do. And the people that I had around me, like I don't talk to very many people, not because I automatically cut everybody out of my life, but I think when you sort of make decisions, you end up, your energy changes, I think. You know, you have different boundaries, you have different priorities. And when you make these big decisions, it's almost as if everything else kind of falls aside and allows you to do this new thing. And I found that the more decisions I was making to better my life, the more people I would meet that wanted to help me do that, and the more opportunities I would find within that new space. So all of a sudden it was like I didn't need the other things anymore. But I think, again, it comes back to, you know, I'd been through so many incredibly tough things before I got to that point, that I almost had this sense of faith that everything was going to be okay on the other side. I just had to persist and I just had to keep going. I kind of knew that it was like one day at a time, and sometimes it felt like one step forward and 3 steps back, and that was okay. As long as I remembered why I was doing it and the purpose behind everything, I was okay. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I speak to, or the biggest things I speak about when I talk to people when it comes to overcoming addiction. It's like, you have to have your sense of why has to be so much stronger than anything else, that you don't care about the opinions of others, you don't care about the judgments of others, you're quite happy being on your own path because you know that it's the right one for you. And unfortunately, it's not one size fits all. You know, it's one of those things that you can't really say, and this is how you do it, because it is different for everybody. I was just incredibly lucky that I found people along the way, and I was very open-minded about my journey, and I was willing to take on feedback, and I was willing to try new things. You know, I went to AA a couple of times, and even though I didn't enjoy the meetings, I did enjoy talking to the people there about the things that had worked for them. And I think sometimes it's about opening yourself up to trying something new. I think people get so stuck in one way of thinking and thinking this is how it has to be. And it's like, no, there's a whole other world out there. You just have to choose to be open to it.
Yeah, I fucking love that so much, that you don't just have to go this one way and you can never choose. Like, because so many people get stuck doing that. Same thing with like working a job that you hate, and like,
100%.
yeah, but I've gone to university for this job and I've worked here for this long and I'm up for a promotion and I know everyone and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, but are you happy though? If you're not happy, you can always change to something else. And
I know.
trying
it's crazy,
different
isn't
things.
it?
Yeah, and trying different things does not mean that you're a failure at whatever you're doing before. It just means that it's no longer right for you. Like, it might have been right for you at the time, but like you said, like, it wasn't right. Like, AA, maybe it works for a lot of people, but it didn't work for you. But at least you tried it, you gave it a go, and you're like, okay, well, this is what works for me. And now there'll be so many people out there who can relate to this. And like, you know, there's a different method for every single person out there. You just have 100%. To find whatever works for you.
Absolutely. And it's so relevant to fitness as well. Like, there's not just one set way to get to any specific goal.
Yeah.
There are plenty of ways. You just have to find the one. Like, you'd know this, you know, the quotes about what's the best diet for me, or what's the perfect training program. It's like the one that you can stick to.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly it, you know. And same with mental health. Like, every self-care strategy that you have, or every form of therapy that you choose to try, it's like going to a shoe shop and trying on a pair of shoes. You're not going to buy a pair of shoes that looks really cool but is a size too small, but it's going to give you blisters as you're walking down the street. You know, like, you have to find the pair of shoes that's going to allow you to walk the steps that you have to walk.
Yeah, 100%.
Same with all that stuff.
Yeah, and you can also buy a few different pairs of shoes. 100%. And maybe one day you want to wear the pink shoes, the next day you want to wear the black, and that's maybe one day you mix them together. Like.
Exactly.
Yeah, I love that analogy. Yeah, it's so true. And it is. I love hearing stories from people who have kind of broken, like, out of the path that they thought were destined for them. So for you, it might have been like, well, I'm just gonna be like alcoholic now. Like, my dad was an alcoholic, my mom had mental health problems. Like, of course I'm also going to have mental health problems. Like, I can imagine that is very common among people. So it's so amazing to see that you're like, no, fuck that, I'm not going down this path anymore. I'm gonna make a decision and change. But like, I'm just curious like, how did this go down with your friends? Like, were they very supportive around this, or because drinking is such a big thing of like a social thing?
Yeah, it's massive. I mean, yeah, no, it didn't go down that well at all. Yeah. I think there's a lot of perceived judgment around, especially, I mean, it's, like I said, especially back in those days, you know, I've been sober now, it'll be 15 years this New Year's. So back then no one was really talking about this stuff. And especially in a place like Hong Kong, where you don't get asked out for coffee. It's so polluted outside. You don't get asked out for hikes. It's kind of like everyone, you know, you get paid to entertain your clients in a bar. So there's this whole other side of life that you have to try and navigate. And I noticed it a lot in my clients who would come in to train with me. For me as a coach, it became damage control, because their job during the week was to go out and entertain their clients, and everybody got drunk. And then so their 45 minutes to themselves 3 times a week was then coming and sweating it out of the gym. You don't make that much progress, but for them it was kind of like, it's just maintenance. It's literally just damage control. It's giving them an outlet from all of this other stuff. And it's, you know, 3 lots of 45 minutes that they feel like they're not having to be in a bar drinking. They can actually focus on the stuff that they want to do. But yeah, it was the beginning of the end of my relationship, because we had met when I was drunk. And, you know, of course, as you do, like back in those days, having a boyfriend was just a drunken night out in a cab right away. Much more difficult these days, like especially dating sober. That's like,
I haven't experienced that.
Holy shit, don't. But we'd met out drunk, and so it was amazing what we didn't have in common when that wasn't part of the equation anymore. Because it was like, in the weekends, he still wanted to go out and party. And I was like, well, I don't really want to do that. So then what did you do? And then, you know, on the Sunday, he was so hungover because he'd been out all Saturday night or all Friday night as well. And I was like, well, I want to go and do things. So that was a big learning curve for me. And, you know, even now, like, I don't think I could date somebody who partied, because now I have very, very, very different priorities and very different boundaries, you know? So that sort of taught me what I didn't want, and it changed what I look for. And it's the same kind of, it was the same kind of thing with friends. Like, how many times have you been in a bar and you have these drunken D&Ms where you're so close to the other person. It's like the most intense conversation you've ever had in your life. You're almost spitting over each other because there's no concept of personal space whatsoever. And God knows what you say, but there are secrets shared. There's like gossip. There's, you wake up in the morning thinking, like, dreading the text that you're going to get from the night before because you've done something stupid. But because everyone's in the same boat, you don't really notice it. When you stop doing that, you're in a bar all of a sudden and you notice the people that are having the D&Ms over in the corner. You notice the people that are doing like the dirty dancing at the bar. I used to think I was an amazing dancer. I was not. But I did split my jeans trying to drop it like it's hot on the dance floor. But you see all these behaviors and like, oh my God, that was me. And for me, it was like this, holy shit, being on the other side of this now, it's kind of like, it just reinforced to me how much I didn't want to be those people anymore. But like I said, it was very confronting for those people, because if your sense of connection with them is in that environment, what else do you have in common? Like, you're taking away the drinking, you're taking away being the life of the party. It was almost kind of like, for me, I stopped getting invited to things because people understood I was no longer going to be the fun one, or I was no longer the one that was guaranteed to stay and have a drink for the road, or, like, I just stopped getting the invitations. So it definitely forced me to look elsewhere. But that's what Half Ironman gave me. That's what Triathlon Club gave me, because we would go out as a group in the weekends and, we'd talk transition times over a Diet Coke. It was a completely different experience. And then, for me, it was kind of like, I look back now and I don't miss drinking at all. Yes, I had some fun times, but those self-loathing Sundays where I was sick for like 6 hours because I was so hungover and I hated myself, that is such a deterrent that I would never go back to that life. But they carry on.
Sorry, was it hard to, like, when people stopped getting invited you to things? Was it hard for you? Did you struggle with that, or were you just like, oh well, I'm gonna go hang out with my new friends then?
Yes and no. I think it's always hard when you perceive that there's that, it's like a sense of rejection. For me, it was kind of like being back at school again and feeling like I was no longer part of the cool kids. You're all of a sudden you're on the outside looking in and thinking, how can I navigate this? Do I want to be part of that anymore? And I think, again, that it comes back to me. It's like your sense of why has to be so important that it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks of what you're doing or where your journey is taking you. You don't worry about their opinions. You don't worry about their judgments. You just know who you are and you know what you're willing to accept for yourself. And initially, again, there are certain things that I miss. I miss getting drunk at 3:00 in the afternoon and going to a pool hall, like there's definitely sides of things, but the bad for me outweighed the good times. And now, I remember when I first came to Australia and, you'd invariably see people out and they'd be like, oh, well, why aren't you drinking? Like it was kind of like, it was more normal to be absolutely shit-faced than it was to be out sober. And I'm like, how is this possible?
Yeah.
How is this possible? There's still definitely a perceived judgment around being sober.
100%.
But now I realize that it's not my shit, it's their shit. Like, this is a you problem. It's not a me problem. And as long as I'm really secure in what I'm doing, it doesn't really matter. Like, I can go out now and if I'm with the right people who can have fun, I don't need to be drunk to be the life of the party. Like, I'm absolutely fine with being out and having a good time and not waking up hungover the next day.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think, like, when people start questioning things like that, like, fuck, I've done it as well. I've been like, why are you not drinking? Come on, have one drink. I've been that person, and not proud of it, but I definitely have. And it just comes down to, like, it's weird for you, but it's not, like you said, it's not their problem. If they don't want to drink, that's their thing. Like, they don't want to drink, but then you get like offended by it. So like, okay, well, is there something wrong with me? Are they judging me? Why are they not drinking? Like, what are they going to say about me? Like, is this making me feel a bit uncomfortable? And it's the same thing, like, now when we're recording this, we're going into Christmas, and I think this is like something that is so common around this time of the year. People like, why are you not eating this? Or why are you eating too much of that? Or why are you not drinking? Why are you drinking? And people just have so many opinions about what you should and should be doing. But like you said, 100%. It all comes down to them. It's not you. It's like, you live in your own best life, whatever you want to do. But people are still having opinions about what it is that you do and what you don't do.
100%. And it's again, like you said, it comes back to, if that's the way you're feeling, if what I'm doing is making you uncomfortable, then maybe it's time that you reevaluate your own relationship with the thing that's making you uncomfortable.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So for people who have friends that they might be worried about, or family or whatever, who are struggling, who they suspect struggling with like alcoholism or something like that, like what is something that you usually recommend for those people to do, and like how to address it and bring it up like with someone who they're worried about?
Oh my God, it's the worst thing in the world. And one thing I learned through my dad's journey was that you can't guilt someone out of addiction, you can't shame them out of it, and you can't love them out of it either. Like, the person addicted, the only time that they will ever quit is when they want to. And if they don't want to, you don't have any chance. Like, I remember very clearly one day being at university and going to see my dad. And by that time, he was like he wasn't even a functioning alcoholic. He was just like, he'd started taking sick days at work. Like, he was kind of living in his own little delusional world where he thought that nobody had noticed his behavior, but he was off work more than he was at work. And I remember turning up to where he was, and he was already drunk, and it was the middle of the day. And he was like, can you go to the alcohol store and get me some more whiskey? And I was like, no, I'm not going to be an enabler. Like, what is this? It's the middle of the freaking day. Like, go to work. And he was like, well, if you don't go to the alcohol store, I'm going to drive. And he was drunk. And I was like, oh my God, imagine if he gets in a car and then has an accident and hurts somebody. I'm going to be indirectly responsible for that because I wouldn't go. And I remember just having this screaming match with him about, the fact that didn't he realize he was killing himself, and didn't he realize that he was never going to see me get married or walk me down the aisle or give a father speech or see any grandkids, and how unfair was it? And he just turned to me really calmly, and he was just like, I wish I could tell you that I loved you enough to stop, but I can't. And it was that pivotal moment where you realize that, holy shit, this guy is so far into this that this is literally the only thing he has left. And nothing I say or do at this point is going to change any of that. So it's up to me, the direction that I choose from here on. I could walk away and choose to forsake any relationship with my father in favor of tough love. Or I could just accept that this was the way it was and try and love him and help him through whatever he was going through in the best way I could, and just accept that outside of that, there was nothing I could do to change his behavior. And having already lost one parent, wasn't going to lose another one. So I just tried to drop expectations and drop the shame and drop the guilt, and to just love him for the father I remembered him as when I was little. And I just kind of had to accept that that was the journey that we were now on, and that none of that responsibility had to lie on my shoulders, and that we just had to move forward and navigate this new path. And it wasn't ideal, but at least I got to have a relationship with him, and I learned who I didn't want to be like. It really taught me that his death ultimately made me choose a life of sobriety, and for that I'm forever grateful. And that's the sad thing. Like, for me, I had friends that I remember being out, and I was 24, and it was actually Jacinda Ardern's now partner, Clark Gayford, who was dating one of my friends at the time. And claim to fame. He actually came up to me and he was like, your friends love you, Alexa, but you make it very, very difficult for them when you're drunk. And for me, that was the first time any of my friendship circle had tried to have a conversation with me about my drinking. I would have two consequent conversations with two different groups of friends who all cared about me enough. And my initial reaction was just to push them away. I just got angry. I felt confronted. I felt uncomfortable. I felt like I was judged. I felt like everyone was ganging up on me. But eventually I came to realize that they just wanted the best for me. And I was really lucky that I had friends that cared enough to have those sorts of conversations. So I think there's no right or wrong way to do this. When it came to my dad, I went to AA just to, when he was going through his stuff, to talk to other people about how they were navigating the stuff with their families, just to get advice, different ways of doing situations or handling situations. But I think the biggest thing is, you don't need to make a situation confrontational. You can just let the person know that you're there for them when they're ready to speak. And it's a really uncomfortable conversation to have, but I think there's no right or wrong way to do it. Like if you're approaching a situation with genuine care, with the intent to help, you're not going to say or do anything wrong. And if you do initially push the person away, they will come back and talk to you when the time is ready. But I hate to say it, but no one is going to quit through one conversation. The person will quit when they are ready to quit.
Yeah.
And that's the shit thing. What I will say has helped me is having the whole adventure side of things, having something to look forward to. That's the thing that drives me, because I think for a lot of people who potentially aren't happy in their day-to-day lives and they have nothing to look forward to, that weekend of release and that binge drinking is the one thing that allows them to escape their reality. So finding something to do in the weekends, like for me, it's going out and adventuring. It's like shark diving, or, you know, jumping out of planes, or going off and doing, you know, crazy horse races across the desert. Those are the things that I have to plan in my diary so that I feel I have things to look forward to. And I think that side of, I think that is so underestimated. I think, you know, I listened to an amazing podcast by Mel Robbins, and she was giving this incredible insight into, like, she's like, if you feel stuck, you know, if you feel weak, then take effort to get stronger. If you feel uneducated, learn a new skill, you know, whatever it is, pick the action that's going to give you the opposite, so that you can start feeling accomplished, so you can start feeling like you have purpose, so you can start feeling unstuck. Because once you get to the thing, you know, and invariably once you start trying all these new things, like try learning a new language, try going to a different coffee shop, try going to sports games, try going hiking in the weekends, you know, there's plenty of options out there. Try something new, and invariably you'll end up collecting a bunch of stuff that feels really good, so that you'll be less likely to go out and have as many nights out on the drink. You won't feel like you need to escape as much. That's probably my biggest piece of advice.
No, I absolutely love that so much. And I think there's a lot of people who probably are struggling a lot more than they actually want to admit, because in the day-to-day life, it's like the Monday to Friday hustle. You work all week and then you get absolutely hammered taking drugs or whatever on the weekends. And then you said, like you said, to wake up Sunday morning, you have the worst hangover of your life and you just feel like awful, and then you just do it all over again because you dislike the weekday life so much. So like I 100% agree, like finding something that you enjoy doing also, like during the week as well, like make your weekdays a bit more like your weekends. Like you can still go out for a nice dinner on a Tuesday night. You don't have to wait till the weekend, and you know you can still go on like a little mini getaway, maybe if you have that kind of job where you can take a day off during the week, and make your life a bit more enjoyable like that. And it doesn't have to be all about when can I get the most drunk next time.
100%. Look, I mean, for me, when I bought a guitar the first time, I started feeling really sorry for myself. It's still sitting in the corner gathering dust, but I had my first breakup in Australia, and I went to an energy healer, and she was like, you need to find a way to enjoy your own company. And I was like, cool. So I went to Bondi Junction. I walked into I'd always thought about learning the guitar. I walked into a shop and I was like, right, if I can find a guitar that's within my budget and they've got a lesson that day, I'm meant to buy the guitar. I'm going to buy the guitar and I'm going to start learning the guitar. And sure enough, I walked into a store. They had a lesson at 3 p.m. that day. I bought the guitar and I went to my first lesson. I spent all weekend, it was an Easter weekend, at home, just sitting in front of like YouTube, learning how to play the guitar. And I found that I was out, and then I'd go and have a coffee with friends. And I was so amped about learning the guitar and learning this new skill that I then looked forward to going home to learn the new skill. So there's plenty of things that you can do. It doesn't need to be learning guitar. Like at the moment, I'm learning Spanish on Duolingo. I come and I sit there and I do my little Spanish, you know what I mean? And it's finding the little things like that in the middle of everything. It doesn't need to be this massive, drastic change. It can be finding little moments of joy in everyday life that makes everything else bearable until you figure out what it is that you really want to do.
God, I love that so much. And I'm just looking at the time and like I could talk to you all day because I feel like this is so interesting and so like up my alley, and I can relate to so much of the stuff that you're saying. And I'm sure all of our listeners are going to be able to as well, because I think like there's so many different addictions we can have out there, but I think it does come back to the same core points, and how to overcome it is to find, like you said, like a purpose with something and having that really strong why. And also that you're literally not going to quit. whether that is binge drinking, whether that is having an eating disorder or being addicted to drugs or whatever it is for you, you're not going to quit until you actually want to quit yourself.
100%.
And same thing, unfortunately, like I get so many messages from girls saying like, so worried about my roommate or my friend, and I think she has like an eating disorder, like what can I do? And it's just like this unfortunate thing, like until they want to get help, they're literally not going to stop.
No, so, I know. I mean, that's the sad reality. But I think, if you want to have a conversation with somebody, find a place, find their safe place. If they love going for walks, go for a walk with the dog and broach the conversation in a really non-confronting, indirect way. Hey, you seemed a bit down lately. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
If there's anything that you want to talk to me about, or even sharing a similar experience, like I often find when I talk about my mental health struggles and the things that I've been through, sharing your own vulnerability and owning your own story can often help somebody realize that they have stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's the whole, I don't feel alone. Oh, you relate. Oh, cool. This is normal. It's okay to feel like this. That sort of stuff is underrated. So, sharing is caring.
Absolutely. 100%. I'm massive advocate for that. Well, thank you so much for spending an hour with me. And for, I'm super excited to meet you. I'll see you again. I've met you before.
I'm like, that's forgettable.
To see you again in February when you're coming. But if the listeners want to work with you or find you, like, what are you taking on clients at the moment? Do you have any new projects coming up? Give yourself a little plug.
I'm pretty good at answering DMs if you want to slide in there onto Action Alexa on Insta. I am looking at developing an online platform, so hopefully that is in the works soon.
Ooh,
and look, every now and then I'll take on new personal training clients who I really want to work with. But I love, if people want to learn, I'm more than happy to answer questions. No question is too stupid. I'll always help whenever I can. And I always put up a bunch of workouts and stuff on social media for free. So if that's a starting point, then awesome.
Yeah, definitely. I love your page. There's so much about like so many different good things like workouts and body image and mental health. And this is, I love it. It's super inspiring. So thank you so much again for coming on. Guys, as usual, please, if you like this podcast, make sure you do take a screenshot. You tag myself, tag Alexa, tag Women's Fitness Academy. We love to connect with you. You guys know this already. So please do it. We absolutely love when you tagging us in your stories and telling us what you think. And for those who come in with us to Bali In Feb, you'll see us there. Woo! But thank you so much again, and everyone have a wonderful day.